This video is brought to you in collaboration with wowhead.com.
Hello everyone! With a new expansion on the horizon, I've had a fair few of you ask how to get into the lore. Is there a chronological reading list? Where can you find the information? Could you just play the game to find out? What would I recommend to get into the lore of Warcraft? This mighty universe is spread out over different sources. There are the games, cutscenes, audio dramas, books, short stories, comics, so much media that it's quite extensive to figure out a place to start at. And it also kind of depends on what you enjoy. Do you enjoy reading and doing research for yourself? Or do you want someone to tell the story to you? Or do you want to play through it and experience it firsthand? You know best what you would enjoy, what piques your interest, and that is the number one place to start. What is it that you're interested in? For me personally, I wasn't really into the lore or familiar with the Warcraft universe when I started playing the game. It wasn't until I saw the Wrathgate cinematic that I got curious about what was going on. Who was this Bolvar character? Or the Lich King? Or the Forsaken? There was a betrayal going on. What the heck is it all about? And before I knew it, I had like 50 tabs open on Wowpedia. I was browsing the information and taking it all in. That would definitely be a website that I would recommend if you want to research the broad information on a subject. You won't get the intricate details over at Wowpedia. The pages would become far too big for that. Rather, it's a short and to-the-point description of a character or a zone or whatever you might be looking for. Wowpedia has helped me a whole lot over the years with fact research. One thing to do keep in mind is that it's a website filled in by the fans, and while most of the information is up to date and really solid, always make sure to look for where the information comes from, the source of it, so you know the context of what they're talking about, where they got the information. Always good to check out your sources. That would be a really good place to start for specific searches, but say that you're more the kind to play through something and then figure it out as you go. Warcraft 3 is still a big foundation of the story told within World of Warcraft. There's also Warcraft 1 and 2, but they stood the test of time a bit less than Warcraft 3 did, in my humble opinion, as well as some of the stories shown in Warcraft 1 and 2. They have been retconned by now, meaning that it's been changed and no longer part of the official lore. Warcraft 3, however, even after 18 years, it's still an amazing RTS to play through, and you will see many familiar characters, some that still play a part in the story, even to this day. Playing through the story inside of World of Warcraft, that is going to be a little bit trickier. The classic zones, they've been revamped with the Cataclysm. You could now play classic, of course, relive ye olden days if you like, but in the main game, those old zones are changed. There's also the bits about certain patches or events no longer being available, like the Darkspear Rebellion from Mr. Pandaria, for example, that was only available for a limited amount of time. So again, it's a bit tricky to go through it all inside of World of Warcraft. One tip that I have given before, if you're really dead set on playing it that way, is to look up the different patches that they've released and find your way by following that. But if that doesn't really sound appealing, then maybe just go to YouTube and look for compilations on the in-game cinematics. It makes for some nice popcorn time to see the beautiful creations that Blizzard has put out, especially when you see how far they've gone from the classic cinematics to the full-blown spectacles that we get to see these days. One day, they're going to make a Netflix series on the story of Warcraft. One day, just keep your fingers crossed. And let's not forget about the special series they produced. There's The Burdens of Xiaohao, beautifully portraying the journey of Emperor Xiaohao and the history of Pandaria. There's also Lords of War, the history behind these alternate warlords, and Maraad of Warlords of Draenor. The Tomb of Sargeras audio drama, which details alternate Gul'dan's journey into opening up the Tomb of Sargeras at the start of Legion. A 1000-Year War audio drama, which details the journey of Illyria and Tyrellian with the Army of the Light. The Warbringers, Jaina, Sylvanas, and Azshara. Their history with an eye on the events in Battle for Azeroth. There's even more of them, like Lost Honor and Old Soldier. I'll put some links and playlists in the description down below. But say that you want to go even deeper. You want to dive into the ancient text and absorb all the knowledge of Warcraft from books, comics, mangas, short stories. There's quite an extensive list. Again, you'll find it in the description down below. But where do you begin? I'd say that a good starting point would be the Warcraft Chronicles, Volume 1, 2, and 3. These 3 books, they've been created to clean up the lore of Warcraft that they've established over the years. From the very creation of the Warcraft universe, all the way to the end of the Cataclysm. These 3 books, they will give you a general overview of what the Warcraft universe is all about. After that, it pretty much comes down to what you're interested in. Most, if not all, the books and comics, they stand on their own. As in, they explain enough to understand what the story is all about. So say that you're interested in the Lich King story. Well, Rise of the Lich King would be something for you. Or you're really into Demon Hunters and Lord Illidan, then the Illidan novel, that would be something you might go after. It's always easier to hook onto something when you have an interest for it. That's something that you're going to have to discover for yourself. But what I can do is give you a general idea on what the book is about. If it's something that you might be interested in, I won't go through the list in chronological order. Rather, I'll try to place them together if they're covering a similar subject. Do want to give you a heads up, I will be talking a little bit about what's inside the books, so if you want to be completely surprised, just go ahead and follow the list from Blizzard Watch. Let's start it off with one of the subjects that I know most of you love, which is the Scourge, the Lich King, all that undead good stuff. Road to Damnation is a short story on the WoW website. If you're a big fan of Quel'thelas and you want to know his road to damnation, as in how he became a follower of the Lich King, part of it is actually shown within the original Naxxramas trailer, this short story would be for you. Arthas, Rise of the Lich King is an amazing novel for any Lich King fan out there. Warcraft 3 and Wrath of the Lich King, they did a pretty fantastic job detailing the journey to darkness of young Prince Arthas. This book adds to that. It gives more insight into his thinking process, the schemes behind the scenes, and how players are not the only ones that really like Invincible. Death Knight is a manga for you Lich King Death Knight fans out there. A lot more detail on the background for Death Knights like Varian and Quel'thelas, their journey as servants of the Lich King, and even some of the events from the game itself. There are also the Ashbringer comics. You might recall Tyrion Fordring using the Ashbringer to secure victory over Arthas the Lich King, or perhaps you played a paladin in Legion and you picked up the mighty artifact for yourself. This comic explains its origin and its dark history with the family Mograine. Sylvanas Windrunner, Edge of Night, is another short story on the WoW website. A must-read, in my opinion, with an eye on the upcoming expansion Shadowlands. We know that Sylvanas has led the Forsaken. She joined the Horde and did everything in her power to claim vengeance upon Arthas for what he had done to her. That mission was accomplished at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, so they had to give her a new purpose, a new story. That's what's explained in Edge of Night. And if you like Sylvanas, maybe you like Nephanos as well. His short story Dark Mirror gives insight into our arrogant friend's relation to Sylvanas and their future plans with him. But the Dark Lady was once a high elf. Their people were hit hard by Arthas and his master's plans. They used the Sunwell to resurrect Quel'thelas into a Lich. And that Sunwell, it got a little bit of extra story in the Sunwell Trilogy, a manga that will give the answer for anyone that got really confused during the Burning Crusade. You ever wondered why Caligos all of a sudden showed up at the Sunwell, and who this Anvina girl is that he's going on about? That's all explained within this trilogy. Blood of the Highborn is part of the digitally released Paragons collection. It's a collection of a couple of the short stories that you can find on the WoW website. And then also this Blood of the Highborn. If you're into High Elf, Blood Elf lore, if Quel'thelas makes your heart beat faster, then this is a must-read. Their conflict with the trolls to the aftermath of the Sunwell's destruction and its effects on their people. Lor'themar in the Shadows of the Sun is a short story on the WoW website. Lor'themar, Regent Lord of Quel'thelas, he's taken over leadership of the Blood Elves after the events with the Prince Kael'thas, a man who was not destined or wanted to be in the role of leadership, but finding himself fulfilling it all the same. And if you like Lor'themar, then you'll probably enjoy A Moment in Verse, a later short story added to the WoW website. A story about the relationship between Lor'themar and Philistra. It's really cute, it's very romantic. Would recommend to check out. Now it won't come as a surprise if you know me that I'm a big fan of the dragon lore. It's one of my favorite subjects, beginning with Dawn of the Aspects. This is their start. How Alexstrasza, Ysera, Neltharion, Nosdormu and Malygos became the Aspects and defenders of Azeroth. They would face quite a lot of challenges, but Neltharion's connection to the earth, a world infected with the old gods. It meant that it was more vulnerable to their corruption. Enter the War of the Ancients trilogy. This is 3 books into one, set over 10,000 years ago, detailing the War of the Ancients, the first massive war against the Burning Legion. Azshara, Tyrande, Malfurion, Illidan, Cenarius, demigods, dragons, old gods, Burning Legion, demons. It has so much, and while it takes about half a book, in my opinion, to get into it, once I did, it offered some of the most epic, grand-scale battles in the Warcraft lore. And during the War of the Ancients, Neltharion convinced the other aspects to give up a portion of their powers and create the Dragon Soul, also known as the Demon Soul, only to then turn around and use it not just against the demons, but also the defenders of the world and even his fellow dragons. Day of the Dragon is a continuation of those events. It will be up to heroes like Ronin and Varisa to save the Day of the Dragons and stop Neltharion's schemes. After the day follows the Night of the Dragon. Ronin and Varisa, they make a return dealing with more dragon lore and the nefarious schemes of Neltharion. Yep, Deathwing has been quite busy over the years, a story that will eventually come to a conclusion with the Cataclysm. During that expansion, we saw War Chief Thrall transform into Uber Shaman Goel and assist the aspects in taking care of Deathwing and by extension the plans of the old god N'Zoth. But how did he get that role? What's the journey that led there? That is what Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects explains. On top of that, there's also the short story on the WoW website called Charge of the Aspects. More delicious dragon lore as they prepare themselves for the end of the Cataclysm, facing off against one of their own. And Deathwing's betrayal during the War of the Ancients. It did quite a bit of damage, especially to the Blue Dragonflight and the sanity of his best friend Malygos. World of Warcraft, Shadowwing Volume 1 and 2. Those are comics. During the second Horde invasion, Deathwing, he hit some of his ex on the home world of Draenor, which then transformed into Outland. The aftermath of those events, the transformation of the ex, the insanity of Malygos, all of that is covered within these 2 volumes. And then, from there on out, we would see the Nexus War as it played out in Wrath of the Lich King. World of Warcraft Mage is a manga that I haven't actually fully read yet. Apparently, it's about events in Dalaran around the time of this Nexus War. Moving away from the dragons. I know, I'm as disappointed as you are. During the War of the Ancients, we saw heroes rise up like Malfurion, Tyrande, and from certain points of view, Illidan Stormrage. Not for everyone though, but the edgy demon hunter, he carved out his own path in this war against the Burning Legion. The novel Illidan by William King gives us insight on that journey, his true plans during the Burning Crusade, the process and gruesome trials that demon hunters had to go through while training. If you're interested in that, then this book is for you, connected to the events that we saw go down in the Expansion Legion. With his twin imprisoned, Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind, they would go on to lead their people after the War of the Ancients and bring Druidism into their society, but it did not come without its complications. Curse of the Worgen is a comic series detailing the origins of the Worgen curse, connected to that Druidism and how its darkness crept behind the walls of Gilneas, which transformed its people and its king forever. If you're really into the Gilnean story, then Genn Greymane, Lord of his Pack, is a short story on the WoW website, giving more details about Genn and why, for example, he built a mighty wall around his city. Now walking the path of the Druids, it meant that Malfurion spent quite a bit of time in the Emerald Dream, a realm infected by the old gods with the Emerald Nightmare, and our Archdruid, he got trapped in there by someone that he trusted. That story and his return is told in the novel Stormrage, which deals with the Emerald Nightmare. You might recall this also playing its part in the Expansion Legion. It was a bit of a repeat in the game as something that you could actually play through. The book was the first time that we saw them deal with it, and the way that the nightmare effects are described within it, as well as Tyrande and Malfurion's powers, is way better than the game ever portrayed it. To add to the reasoning as to why Malfurion got trapped in the first place, that can be found in the short story called The War of the Shifting Sands, again available on the WoW website. It's pretty relevant as well, as at the moment the opening of Ankiraj is going down on the classic servers. This story talks about how the Night Elves teamed up with the dragons to face the threat of Cthulhu within Ankiraj and the eventual creation of the Wall. And for the huge fans of Tyrande and Malfurion, you might want to check out Seeds of Faith. Again, on the WoW website, it follows the events of the novel Stormrage, the return of Malfurion, and his marriage with Tyrande. But hey, I hear you. You're not here for the Night Elf tree huggers. You're here for Warcraft, and you want that delicious warfare between the Alliance and the Hordes. Going back to where it all started, with Rise of the Hordes, which is actually part of a series. It's followed by The Last Guardian, Tides of Darkness, Beyond the Dark Portal, and Lord of the Clans. An absolutely brilliant series, in my opinion, which explains how the Horde came to be. Their first and second invasion of Azeroth, the formation of the Alliance of Lordaeron, venturing through the Dark Portal, all the way to Lord of the Clans, which still to this day is my favorite Warcraft novel out of all of them. It describes how Thrall rose up, reformed the Horde and became its leader. The original mindsets behind the Horde, before we got this rotation of different war chiefs. I mentioned how Warcraft 1 and 2, how they've kind of been changed by now. These books are still pretty accurate on how the first and second war played out. And to support the events that we see in Warcraft 3 and the formation of this brand new Horde, there's the short story called Worgen, The Judgment. It details the journey of Worgen into becoming the shadow hunter that we know him as, leading the Darkspear into the Horde. And while the formation of the Horde, it also meant war and strife on the planet of Draenor, which the orcs shared with a race called the Draenei. Unbroken, another short story on the WoW website. It is one, if not the darkest story that you'll find in the Warcraft lore. The rise of the Horde meant not the greatest time for the Draenei. A war followed, one which would change some of their people forever. Again, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the younger viewers. After the defeat of the Horde, some of the orcs were still hanging out on Azeroth. Quite a bit of bad blood between the two factions. In comes Of Blood and Honor, written by Chris Metzen himself. This one might be a little bit tricky to get your hands on, but you could try to go for the Warcraft archive, which has several stories inside of it, including Of Blood and Honor. It describes the aftermath of the war against the Horde. Two men of honor, Tyrion Fordring and Eitrigg, they cross paths with each other. The Alliance and the Hordes, they don't have the greatest history. But does one follow the will of its faction, or their own code of honor? Meanwhile, Thrall and Jaina, they stood shoulder to shoulder in the defense of the world against the Burning Legion. Their partnership continues, trying to be an example to the world that peace between the factions might be an option. This did not come without its struggles. We saw her father, Dalen Proudmoore, disagreeing with his daughter's choices, but there were more out there, not down with going towards peace between the factions. Details of that are described in Cycle of Hatreds. Jaina and Thrall would eventually set up a meeting in Faramore to see if they could extend that peace further. You might recall how in Classic, it was young Anduin leading the Alliance, not his dad Varian. Details of the meeting, details of Varian's past, his disappearance, why Anduin had to be in charge, that is described within the Warcraft comics. Volume 0 to 25 covers a whole lot of story, from Classic until around Wrath of the Lich King, so quite a bit. This is about Varian's journey, as Onyxia tries to mess with him, which still played a massive role in his story further down the line. It also introduces Valera Sanguinar and Brawl Baremantle. Now around volume 19, the story shifts into the Medan Medivh Guardian storyline that has since been retconned, so it's no longer part of the official lore, but I would definitely recommend to check out at least the first 18 issues. And if the Alliance is really your jam, then check out Gelbin Mechatork Cut Short, a short story on the WoW website. Are you a big fan of the gnomes and their leader Gelbin? Are you curious about the fate of Gnomeregan? Want to see gnomes in a different light than just the funny, punnable side characters? This short story is badass, and it shows that you don't want to mess with Gelbin. But for Varian Wrynn, more trials would follow. Going from King of Stormwind to High King of the Alliance. The novel Wolfheart is about the Gilnean Worgen wanting to rejoin the Alliance, but their history has not been forgotten by Varian. On top of that, Tyrande has also received a vision from Elune, showing her that Varian needs to be the one to lead the Alliance during the troubling times of the Cataclysm, but the King of Stormwind has his inner rage to deal with. Speaking of the Cataclysm, this cataclysmic event, it transformed the world of Azeroth. But there was also a lot of transformation amongst the factions. The novel, The Shattering, Prelude to the Cataclysm. It covers a lot of those changes, quite a few that in my opinion should have been portrayed better in-game. So if you're curious as to, for example, how Garrosh became war chief, or Magni was turned into a crystal and the dwarves got a council, this book is definitely worth to pick up. For the dwarves, there's also The Council of Three Hammers, Fire and Iron, a short story on the WoW website, which details the events of the dwarves now have to deal with a council, which leads them, now that the king has been turned into a crystal. Old bad blood between the three dwarven clans. It makes it a little bit difficult to trust each other, but they'll have to get over that for the good of their people. And as I said, Garrosh Hellscream, he became the new war chief of the Horde with the Cataclysm. Heart of War is a short story on the WoW website around a time where Garrosh disappointed Thrall, but the hot-headed orc will get plenty of opportunities to prove himself to the war chief. You a fan of Garrosh and you want to know more about what was going on inside of his head? This one would be for you. Or maybe you're more into the Tauren lore. Bane Bloodhoof, as our fathers before us, is another short story. It deals with Bane taking over leadership of the Tauren after his father's death in the Mak'gora with Garrosh. Or maybe Goblins, more your thing. Gallywix, Trade Secrets of a Trade Prince. A short story, pretty much the origin story of Jester Gallywix, former leader of the Goblins that are part of the Horde. Trust me, you'll never see cookies the same way ever again after reading this story. Then there's also Velen, Prophet's Lesson, a short story for you Velen and Draenei fans out there, as well as part of Anduin's journey, dealing with stepping away from his father, embracing the path of the light, and having Velen as his mentor. And then Varian Wrynn, Blood of Her Fathers. That is a short story that reconnects Varian with his son Anduin in the time of the Cataclysm, where the Old Gods and the Twilight Hammer, they want to take over the world. Also one, if not the only case of proper resurrection in the lore, but it's been described pretty vaguely, so not entirely sure. Those are the stories dealing with the transformation amongst the factions, but the world itself is in turmoil and is going to need some saving. Shaman is a manga that I haven't properly read yet. Apparently, it deals with the elements being in uproar around the time of the Cataclysm. The Earthen Ring are having trouble guiding the elements, and the shaman offers them a brand new path, the path of dark shamanism. Thankfully, the world survived the Cataclysm, and at the end came the dawn of the Age of Mortals. The perfect opportunity for War Chief Garrosh to kick the faction war into overdrive and bomb the out of Faramore. Jaina Proudmoore, Tides of War. In this novel, conflict rises amongst the Horde with the death of a city and the death of a peacekeeper. The novel that shows what the pre-event could not. This would then take us into Mr. Pandaria, which came with a whole bunch of stories to support the factions and the people that we meet in-game. For the short stories on the WoW website, we have Lily's travel journal, connected to the release of Mr. Pandaria. Did you find yourself a big fan of Pandaria? Or perhaps Chen and Lily Stormstout, they stole your hearts. This travel journal, as well as the Pearl of Pandaria graphic novel, and the Quest for Pandaria part 1 to 4, details more on the events of them finding their way and spending time on Pandaria. Trial the Red Blossoms, for those that can't get enough of the Pandaren lore and you want to know more about what it takes to be part of the Shadowpan. Death from Above, about the early history between the Mogu and the Mentit, their whole cycle of rebirth and assault in the walls. The Strength of Steel, remember how they had us catch our own Cloud Serpent mounts? This short story, it deals with the Cloud Serpents. Bleeding Sun, a story that ranks amongst one of the saddest. We have Sunwalker Desco, a Tauren paladin, following visions to the land of Pandaria, where destiny seems inescapable. And the Red Crane Chiji, he is, well, I'll let you discover that one for yourself. The Blank Scroll is an awesome tale, detailing more on the history of the Lorewalkers, like Lorewalker Cho, you might remember, and some of the amazing powers that come with the ability to tell a good story. Overwater, which I haven't read properly yet, but going from the art, I think I should because it looks absolutely badass. Seemingly, it has to do with the Anglers, the fishing faction that we party with during Mr. Pandaria. The Jade Hunters, dwarves trying to work together as they go out and collect some jade from Pandaria. Those are the supporting short stories, but there was also a novel called Worgen, Shadows of the Horde. This takes place after Worgen got his throat sliced up. The Shadow Hunter, he needs some time to recover and reflect on his role amongst the Horde and in the world. It's quite a spiritual book, but also pretty badass, and adds a lot more depth to the following Darkspear rebellion. A rebellion that led to Garrosh's defeat, but the War Chief has done quite a lot of damage to the world. The Untamed Valley, another short story on the WoW website. It deals with the aftermath of the war between the Alliance and Horde on Pandaria. Garrosh might be taken care of, but not all of his loyalists are gone and dealt with quite yet. And neither did the former war chief lose his head. They place him on trial instead to answer for his crimes. a story told in the novel War Crimes. A big part of this book is recapping on past events, getting you up to speed on where the story is right now, and then kicking it off into the next expansion, which was Warlords of Draenor. The game eventually did explain how the Dark Portal turned red, but not before we actually step through it. Those details, they're in the novel. And like with Mr. Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor also had a couple of short stories and comics to support the characters and the stories that we saw on this alternate Draenor. There's Hellscream, which explains the time period of Garrosh arriving on Draenor with the bronze dragon Kael'thas and meeting up with his alternate father to make the plans and form the Iron Horde. Blood and Thunder. You might remember how we partied with Durotan and Garant on Draenor and eventually faced their eldest brother Fenris. This online comic, it details on how he turned against them. There's also Black Hand, which deals with Warlord Black Hand and how he got his Black Hand. Code of Rule, a short story which details the dynamics between the Iron Horde and the former great empire of the Ogres on Draenor. Apocrypha, which details the history of the Arakoa and their curse. Gul'dan and the Stranger, which has Garrosh chat with Gul'dan for some reason, probably to check if the timeline lines up with what he knows from ours. After Warlords of Draenor, there came Legion, which had that earlier mentioned Illidan novel. Online to support the story, there's Magni's Fault Lines. Magni Bronzebeard, he was turned into a crystal around the Cataclysm time periods, but he's not dead yet. Instead, he's been transformed into the Speaker of Azeroth. Waking up in the comic, the question now becomes, is he going to reclaim his seat of power in Ironforge, or is there a different destiny waiting for him? Nightborn, Twilight of Suramar. You might remember how we partied with the Nightborn in Legion and we helped out with their rebellion. This comic, it explains their history and why the rebellion is there to begin with. High Mountain, a mountain divided. It shares more details on the background of High Mountain before we arrive, their history with the Hammer of Kaskarov and their division. This comic provides more information. Enduin, Son of the Wolf, shows us King Enduin dealing with the death of his father. And there's a really interesting panel which might relate to the future. And if you thought that the artifact quests during Legion were really cool, then you might want to check out World of Warcraft Dark Riders. This is a graphic novel which they released in 2013. But the Dark Riders, they didn't play a massive role in the game, not until the expansion Legion, which came out in 2016. You might recall dealing with the Dark Riders as you were picking up your artifacts. This tale is about their origin, how others have already dealt with them before. It's kinda cool, but also really specific. And from Legion, we moved on into Battle for Azeroth. The novel Before the Storm, it gives you a clearer insight into the mindsets of now War Chief Sylvanas Windrunner and High King Enduin Wrynn going into this expansion. For those that have been curious about Kalia Menethil suddenly showing up and the leadership of the Forsaken, this book reveals those details. And then there's also comics. There's Reunion, a prelude to the return of Jaina Proudmoore with the Alliance, which then leads into reuniting at Quel'thelas. The speaker, more on Magni Bronzebeard and his destiny with trying to save the world, while the world, it seems more interested in fighting each other. And Three Sisters, the long-awaited Windrunner reunion, Illyria, Verisa, and Sylvanas. With the Collector's Edition, there also came two stories, A Good War and Elegy, but they were also made available online to the public. These two books, they tell the stories from the Alliance and Horde perspective, pretty much the details and insight that the game should have told during the Battle of Azeroth pre-event, the initial invasion into Darkshore, as well as the burning of Teldrassil. And later on, we had Mechagon released. The comic Mechagon, it explains how we found our way to the island and the civil war against King Mechagon that we dealt with in the game. And from Battle for Azeroth, we're moving on into the Shadowlands with the latest novel, Shadows Rising. Putting the 4-4 behind us, it's all fine and good. But not all are going to be able to just let go. Wounds of war fester, as the Alliance and Horde, they adjust themselves to the new situation. Meanwhile, Sylvanas and Avanos, they work on their own plans. It wasn't on the Blizzard watch list, but let's not forget about the Traveler series. 3 books taking place after the Cataclysm, so a cool insight into what's going on in the world of Azeroth beyond what the game displays. The story is on its own, traveling around the world, going on adventures, but also having a very interesting bit on the Loa Muzala. On a final note of this quite extensive list, there's also the Warcraft movie universe that we can consider. It's kinda like what they did with Warlords of Draenor, as in it takes place in its own reality. Some changes were made to the established story for the Warcraft movie itself, and to accompany that, we got the novel Durotan, which reveals life on this version of Draenor and the rise of the Horde. Bonds of Brotherhood then shows the Alliance side of things with Lane, Medivh and Lothar. And finally, there's the Warcraft official movie novelization, which is basically the Warcraft movie but in book form, with a bit more insight into what the characters were thinking and their relations to each other. With that, I really hope I got it all and gave you a bit of an idea on where you can go for that sweet, sweet lore. The Blizzard watch list is honestly fantastic and kept up to date. As the section at the start tells us, it doesn't cover the Warcraft Legends manga series, and they're right about that. Those stories, they're very specific, sometimes not even canon. Like, do you want to know more about the Darkmoon Faire or Hammond Nessingwary? Then you might want to check them out. But that is really for the deep divers out there. I think with what we covered today, it can put you on the right path and hopefully find the stories that are going to add to your World of Warcraft experience. So for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you're looking for more details on all the things we talked about today, then check out the Delayed WoW article in the description down below, as well as all the other things I promised to link in the description down below. If you liked the video, perhaps you want to give it a thumbs up. Comments, they please our YouTube algorithm overlords. You could also subscribe and ring the bell to be notified on future uploads. And with that, until next time, see ya!